In today's video we're going to take a journey back in time to the golden age of British television comedy. The 1970s was a decade in which comedy reigned supreme, giving us some of the most beloved comedy stars in British television history. So, sit back, grab some tea and biscuits and enjoy a comedic trip down memory lane as we explore the careers of some of the best loved British TV comedy stars of the 70s who are happily still with us today. And let's see what they're up to now. One of the most popular stars of British television during the 70s and 80s, Richard O'Sullivan was a former child actor who made his acting debut aged just 8. In 1973, he became a star thanks to his leading role in the hit sitcom Man About the House, which spawned two equally popular spin-offs, George and Mildred in 1976 and Robin's Nest in 1977. In the second of these, Richard O'Sullivan's character Robin Tripp opened a bistro with girlfriend Vicky. Richard remained busy throughout the 80s, starring in such shows as Dick Turpin and Me and My Girl. His final acting role came in 1996. For the past number of years, Richard has lived at Brinsworth House, a retirement home for actors and entertainers. Although he seems to be unfairly forgotten these days, throughout the 70s impressionist Mike Yarwood was just about the most popular entertainer on British television. His BBC shows Look Mike Yarwood and Mike Yarwood in Persons were huge ratings winners. And while it's well known that Mike's contemporaries Morecambe and Wise had one of the most watched shows ever with their Christmas special broadcast on Christmas night 1977, what is often overlooked is the fact that Mike Yarwood's show, broadcast on that very same evening, attracted an even higher amount of viewers. Mike's popularity began to decline as the 80s progressed, and he sadly faded from the limelight, making the odd guest appearance here and there in the ensuing years. Today, Mike is a fellow resident of Richard O'Sullivan at Brinsworth House Retirement Home. Although he probably retains a higher profile than Mike Yarwood, Scottish comedy star Stanley Baxter is another hugely popular entertainer of the 60s and 70s who often gets overlooked today. Much like Yarwood, Stanley Baxter's television comedy variety shows were big ratings winners, and he became much loved as a result. With lavish sets and big musical numbers, the shows were incredibly expensive to make, a fact that eventually led to their cancellation in the mid-80s. In 2008, at the age of 82, Stanley briefly came out of retirement and made a one-off ITV Christmas special, Stanley Baxter Now and Then. An authorised biography, The Real Stanley Baxter, was released in 2020. The character of Margot Ledbetter in 70s sitcom The Good Life was originally only meant to be a minor support character, but Margot's popularity with viewers, coupled with the superb performance of Penelope Keith, saw Margot's screen time increased and led to the character becoming one of the most iconic in British TV comedy history. In 1977, Penelope won a BAFTA for her performance in The Good Life, and in 1979 went on to star in another, even more popular sitcom, To the Manor Born. Other comedy roles followed during the 80s and 90s in shows such as Executive Stress and No Job for a Lady. Since the late 90s, Penelope has concentrated mainly on theatre work, and in 2014 was honoured with a damehood for services to the arts and charity. As with her co-star Penelope Keith, the television career of Felicity Kendall really took off in 1975 with her role in The Good Life. Up until this point, she had mainly appeared on the stage and in small supporting roles on TV. Although Felicity remains primarily a theatre actress to this day, she has still enjoyed a successful television career, including starring roles in 80s sitcoms Solo and The Mistress. Between 2003 and 2006, she starred alongside Pam Ferris in the cosy crime mystery series Rosemary and Thyme. As already mentioned, Felicity Kendall remains a busy theatre actress to this day. Perhaps one of the most underrated British comedy stars of his generation, Brian Murphy's acting career began more than 60 years ago. His rise to stardom began with his casting as miserly landlord George Roper in smash hit 70s sitcom Man About the House. So popular were the characters of George and his wife Mildred, played by Eutha Joyce, the two received their own self-titled spin-off series in 1976. Running for 38 episodes over 3 series, George and Mildred was arguably even more popular than Man About the House. A feature film version was released in 1980. Brian has starred in many other comedy series since, including L for Lester, Lame Ducks, The Booze Cruise, and perhaps most famously as Alvin Smedley in Last of the Summer Wine from 2003 to 2010. He remains active as an actor to this day. James Bolam is one of those actors who is equally adept at playing in both comedy and drama. However, it is for his comedic roles for which he is best known. He first came to fame in 1964 when The Likely Lads hit our screens. The 70s sequel Whatever Happened to the Likely Lads saw his stock rise even higher, and today, 50 years after the first episode was broadcast, Whatever Happened to the Likely Lads remains one of the finest sitcoms ever made. James Bolam's other comedy credits include the brilliant 80s sitcom Only When I Laugh and 90s hit Second Thoughts with Linda Bellingham. Over his long, prolific career, James has also won many plaudits for his drama roles in series such as When the Boat Comes In, The Beiderbecke Affair and New Tricks. Happily, James Bolam remains active as an actor to this very day. During the 1970s and 80s, there weren't many actresses on British television who were quite as loved as Wendy Craig. Beginning her television acting career in the 50s with a succession of small supporting roles, it wasn't until 1967 that she found fame with her starring role in the sitcom Not in Front of the Children, which saw Wendy pick up the BAFTA for Best TV Actress in 1969. The early to mid-70s saw more success for Wendy with comedy hits And Mother Makes 3 and its sequel And Mother Makes 5. Becoming known for playing well-meaning but rather scatterbrained housewives, this went to another level in 1978 with arguably the finest role of Wendy's career, that of Rhea Parkinson in the smash hit bittersweet sitcom Butterflies. Later TV credits include 90s sitcom Brighton Bells, an 8-year run playing matron in the Royal throughout the noughties, and the part of Mrs. Bat in children's series The Worst Witch from 2017 to 2019. One of Wales' best-loved entertainers, the multi-talented Max Boyce found huge fame in the 1970s with his distinctive combination of comedy and song, featuring humorous and nostalgic observations on Welsh life and the nation's obsession with the sport of rugby. Starting his career performing in the pubs and clubs of South Wales, Max was a contestant on TV talent show Opportunity Knocks in 1973. Live albums of his act proved popular around this time, particularly the 1975 release We All Had Doctor's Papers, which remains the only comedy album to ever reach number 1 in the UK album charts. Max was rewarded with his own TV series on BBC One in 1977, simply titled Max Boyce. This ran for 2 series and 6 specials over a period of 4 years, cementing his position as one of the UK's favourite comedy musicians. Now approaching his 80th birthday, Max Boyce is still performing his live show to packed audiences who can't get enough of this legendary Welsh entertainer. One of the most iconic and influential comedy stars of his generation, John Cleese first came to the attention of TV audiences as a cast member of the satirical comedy show The Frost Report. In 1969, his fame would go into overdrive as a member of the legendary Monty Python comedy team. The zany and surreal Monty Python's Flying Circus set a benchmark for TV sketch comedy for all others to follow, influencing countless future comedy stars in the process. Of course, Monty Python wouldn't be the only influential comedy series John would be a part of. In 1975, he, along with his then wife Connie Booth, created perhaps the ultimate television sitcom with the classic Fawlty Towers. In 1988, John Cleese became an unlikely romantic leading man of the movies when he starred in the hit film A Fish Called Wanda. Indeed, today John is perhaps better known for his film roles than his TV work. But Monty Python's Flying Circus and Fawlty Towers will forever retain their place at the very pinnacle of British television comedy. That was, of course, just a very small selection of TV comedy stars of the 70s who are happily still with us today. Join me soon for part 2 and also a look at stars of the 80s. As ever, thanks for watching, and remember, nostalgia is what it used to be.